Alright everyone, we start off today talking about how really, if you want to look at an attack on US democracy, it's not Trump or populism or Trump's fans that really have done or are doing that. It's actually the so-called counterpoint to that, which is the propaganda of the globalists and the legacy media. Of all things that are driving a wedge into US culture, driving people apart, causing crime, potentially, certainly causing social stress, it's really propaganda. It's nothing that Trump did. I'll try to explain. Now, first and foremost, if you're watching this video on YouTube, there will be a pinned comment down below with links to 4 other video hosting sites that I use. Keep in mind, I make 4 videos a day, although today 5, because there's a literary update, but only 2 or 3 go on YouTube, in the case of the latter. The others go only on alt-tech sites. New tech, I've started calling it. It's no longer really just an alternative to big tech. At this point, there's enough innovation and enough users that it's just new tech. It's the next wave of technology that more and more people are using. It's no longer just an alternative. Here's the thing. We've been told now for years that Donald Trump, or Trump's fans, Trump's ideas, populism in general, the America First ideology is an attack on democracy. It's going to destroy the fabric of our democracy. The first counterpoint is, of course, what they mean is typically direct democracy, which a republic, which is what the U.S. actually is, was literally implemented to avoid, because basically that's just tyranny of the majority. This is why you've got a House of Representatives that's essentially directly democratic, but you have a Senate that's not. This is why the filibuster exists. This is why initially, for the first few years of the United States, the Senate wasn't even voted for in a democratic fashion. It was voted for by state legislatures. Most people don't know this. This is why you have a separation of powers, to prevent 51% of the population from dispossessing the other 49, or to prevent a slim majority of states from dispossessing the others, or designing some sort of a financial framework, tax system, or something that screws the other states. This is essentially what it seeks to avoid. The second counterpoint is that if you look at what Trump did and said he wanted to do, basically it sounds like most other politicians from 10 to 20 years ago. Like if you look at the 80s and the 90s, you're going to be hard-pressed to find any major political force that really suggested many things outside of what Trump was saying that weren't ridiculed and mocked. So some old former hippie back in, the fucking teacher in Beavis and Butthead, maybe. But that was a laughingstock. Bernie Sanders was considered massively fringe until the last half-decade. Now, all of a sudden, he's got a little fan club, and you have elements within the Democratic Party, of course, seeking to expand their power, that now cast off basic populism as somehow extremism. But I can look back at even Democratic presidents like Clinton or Obama, or even, to an extent, even if I go back as far as Jimmy Carter, and I'll find them saying similar things to Trump on multiple issues, certainly on the border, certainly on war, in name, certainly on certain elements of tax reform. Nobody ever runs on a campaign of, I'm going to screw the middle class. Nobody ever runs on a campaign of, hey, I'm going to make the working class pay more. There's a reason for that. Trump actually delivers that tax relief, and it gets lambasted, propagandized about. You have a significant proportion of the U.S. population from the middle and working class. They got tax relief under Trump's plan, but they don't think that they did. They literally will not acknowledge that he gave them tax relief. Instead, they try to cast it off as tax relief only for billionaires and corporations, which is literally the opposite of the kind of tax reform that was imposed. If you look certainly at the capping of salt, the write-off for states that have high tax rates, that definitely affected millionaires and billionaires, but it didn't lower their taxes, it upped them. If you look at the child tax write-off, I find it funny. Right now, people on the left, like Democrats, are cheering because Biden's going to start giving payments to people who have kids. Instead of having a bottom-level deduction, they're just going to get an actual check. It's a different strategy, but it's essentially the exact same thing. Essentially, Biden is replicating what Trump did, but making it more obvious by making it an actual check instead of an end-year bottom-line deduction. While letting the double child tax credit, by the way, lapse, which means that those people, and right now they're getting a few $100 a month, and they're like, well, yay, Biden's giving me money for having a kid. You're going to pay it in additional taxes. But they don't notice that. See, the propaganda is complete for them. The fact is that really our democracy is more endangered by propaganda than by any act that Trump engaged in. Here's why. People cannot make prudent decisions unless they know actually what's going on. Unless they know the truth of a situation, unless they can observe what's actually happening, document it, understand it, they're going to be at a loss to make proper decisions. If you therefore have a representative government system in which people vote to elect the people that are leading them, how can they be expected to make that decision in a proper manner if they don't even know what's going on? Many of these people don't even understand what populism is. They think that it's, America First basically means white males want to oppress you more. Well, no, it means that you want to avoid oppression by foreign states and you want the government to represent the people that actually voted for it. That's basically it. All of the other things that it could involve are side issues, including the pure fiscal arrangement that it develops. But people don't understand that because they've been propagandized to. They still think that Trump gassed a bunch of people to take a photo op. They still, in many cases, they still think that Trump is a Russian asset, despite the fact that the asterisk administration coming soon after him, the Biden administration, is the one that repealed Trump's sanctions on the Russian energy sector. Well, of course, these things are not easily reconciled. It doesn't make any sense. The person who is supposedly Putin's puppet is actually doing the most to harm Russia, in the economic sense, using Ukraine technically as an excuse, I would admit, technically, by targeting the energy sector, and the man who comes after him that supposedly is going to hardball the Russian regime and is America number one, ha ha ha, come on man, Corn Pop was a Russian babushka, repeals those sanctions. Because people don't understand what's actually happening, they can't make proper decisions. That's basically it in a nutshell. Too long didn't read version. People need to make proper judgments and therefore need actual facts. But things that masquerade as facts but aren't true is what they believe in. If you look at the legacy media, and Malcolm X pointed this out famously, they're capable of twisting people's minds to the point where the things that they believe in, and they'll defend those beliefs very vigorously, can be literally the opposite of reality. This is the case for Trump at many points. The things that they believe he did or said often were never done or said at all. For instance, his famous quip, which I see repeated ad nauseum by liberals on Twitter, about Republican voters being more stupid, so if he ever ran for office, he'd do it as a Republican. That quote was never actually said. There's no source for the quote. This was initially a meme. I think it came initially before he even ran for office. But it stuck in people's heads, and millions of people believe that that's an actual quote. Pissgate. They still believe the Steele dossier. It's been completely and totally debunked, but there are still people who think that Trump had Russian hookers piss on the Obama's bed when they left the Trump Hotel in Russia. Well, never happened. We can prove that it never happened. The entire dossier was completely fabricated. Nothing in it was true. But there are people who don't understand or acknowledge that. Even if they were told by, Mueller himself, yeah, by the way, the whole thing was bullshit, they still would believe it. How can they possibly make prudent decisions? Keep in mind, these are the people that vote for the elected officials that run things. This is why I'm a libertarian. Because when you have this sort of system, if it's far more constrained, if the Constitution is expansive and people's individual rights take major importance, even more than they do now, the abuse tends to be less. The abuse is less as the government's power is less. The government is crafted by the people, and they get the government that they deserve. If they're ignorant, if they believe things that clearly are not true, they're going to get a government that is going to play on that ignorance and use it essentially, in many cases, to expand its own power and to abuse people. Unfortunately, that's what we see today with Biden's ATF and DOJ. You've got political witch hunts going on, like the case against Giuliani, raiding his office and shit like that. You've got attempts to denigrate the Second Amendment, the First Amendment. You've got, them massively expanding the police state. It's almost a little bit like what happened after 9/11, another example of a case in which we weren't told the truth. We weren't told about the Saudi involvement until very, very recently. 2 years ago is when Trump finally did the declassification of the redacted pages of the 9/11 report. Until then, we kind of sort of knew that Saudi Arabia was involved, but we didn't know how much, and we should have retaliated, by the way, at the time. That was covered up because the American people might have boycotted the Saudis and it would have driven oil prices up. That's basically what it boils down to. Now we don't have that problem until Biden rips the energy sector apart. There are still people who think that he's like a lean green fighting machine when it comes to climate change. They're going to be very confused in a few years when fracking is still going on. It's amazing the lengths to which cognitive dissonance will go, even when you can prove a person is wrong. Typically, what do? If you're debating them, insofar as you can loosely use that term in today's internet, they'll pivot. They'll start talking about something completely different. That's about all. Peace out.